tonight we have a really exciting presenter, and it's my honor also to introduce you to Naty Tremblay. Hi, Naty. I said in the office the other day, I said, Naty's the cat's meow. And I guess what I mean by that, Naty, is I think of you as an artist, as a playful spirit, as a enlivener of everyone around you. Naty Tremblay, this is from Naty's bio. Naty Tremblay believes in the radical and transformative power of the arts, leveraged for community-rooted education, organizing, healing, and political activism. Yeah, I just love that. I read that sentence and I was like, oh, someone from my own heart. Naty's experiences as an identical twin, a metis-francophone farmer, a rambler, and a genderqueer feminist has shaped their creative social change practice. So I'm really excited to have you here, Naty. And with that welcome, I also say welcome to everyone online. Again, I say one more time for people who just joined in, be welcome to keep your videos on or off. It's entirely up to you. And I also welcome you to change your name if you're able to. Go click on your little image or your word and change your name. And also let us know what your pronouns are tonight. And we'll learn more about that as the workshop goes on. So with all of those welcomes, I tag over to Naty.
Sweet. Thanks for that, Nicole. I'm gonna integrate cat's meow into my CV henceforth. Thank you. So yeah, bienvenue, bonjour, sago. Yeah, it's good to be here, y'all, in the digital ethers. Though it is very matrix-like, I'm imagining a circle of your faces and your names. I'm gonna, have a little slideshow, really just to give some visual cues and to help me kind of not digress too much, because I am definitely a storyteller. What I can say, riffing off of the bio that Nicole gave, is that what I'm sharing is it really kind of parallels my life's journey, to be totally honest. I identify as a trans and two-spirit person. And so it reflects my own learnings, questions, and insights as I have, especially in the last 20 years, connected more with trans and two-spirit communities. And Canmore has a special place in my heart. I did want to share this in terms of my coming out journey, because as Nicole mentioned, I grew up in an agrarian community called Pointe-aux-Roches. It's a Muskrat French Métis community, but very much in a process of assimilation. And I'd say a lot of pretty strict gender norms, and unfortunately a lot of homophobia in and around there, and racism too, I should say. And I decided, after graduating from high school, my twin and I, we bought a beat up old van, and we drove west. Of course we did. And we ended up in Canmore. I don't exactly know how we ended up in Canmore, but we did. I think it was the mountains. And we ended up living on and off for almost a month, actually. We left and we came back, and we left and we came back. And we just, and I say we, my twin and I, consistently found that we could meet people and come out, and that people were super welcoming. And I don't know if that continues to be people's experiences, but it was incredibly meaningful for us. So thanks for that. Yay, Canmore and the mountains. Woo! So with that, I'm gonna do a little screen share. Who did it? There we go. Yes. Do a little presentation mode. You get to see behind the scenes, always fun. Okay. And I do apologize. I always feel a little bit bad taking over people's screens. Like you don't really get to consent to that, but so you can close it if you want. You don't have to watch this, but so here we go. In case you're wondering what we're doing tonight, we're going to explore the gender galaxy. Woo! And that should suggest we're aiming to see the infinite potential of human expression. Oh yes, because I don't know if you've ever looked up into the cosmos and really pondered and wondered, wow, like what is all of that shiny light about? To me, I just see it as infinite potential, infinite opportunities to ponder what could life look like? What could sentient beings look like out there? And I think that exists in every single one of us. Yes, I hope that just scintillates you. We already did the bio thing, so I'll move right along. Yeah, but I included in there. So I am currently the executive director of Rittenhouse, A New Vision, which is an organization that does transformative justice. We do trainings, but we also mostly just like work alongside community who are seeking alternative ways to, yeah, to have justice in their lives. And I do want to say that that is specifically coming from an Indigenous worldview of healing justice, just to say that we have the power to have justice in our lives. And I could say more, but I won't, because this workshop is not about transformative justice. I will also say I'm a PhD candidate for the Social Practice and Transformational Change program, which is a new program at the University of Guelph. And I just want to shout that out because it's a new program. You don't have to have a master's, just lived experience doing community engaged work. And you can also make a body of artwork. You don't have to necessarily write a big old paper. So I'm just planting the seed. Okay, moving right along. University of Guelph. I have some of my own acknowledgements. I want to give thanks to Nicole for making some acknowledgements. I always incorporate that into my own programming. I'm in Toronto, Dish with One Spoon, Wampum, Territory. And it feels so important to name that because it's also kind of, those are agreements for how we share this space. Because when we name the communities that are here, it's always been a gathering place for many, many nations, Haudenosaunee peoples with many different folks in that group, Anishinaabe people with many folks in that group, Métis people with many folks in that group, Huron-Wendat people, woo, and with their own agreements before colonization for sharing these territories. And so I just speak that because I'm humbly a part of that agreement. I try as best I can to be a steward of these territories, which is to say, get what you need, make sure that others get what they need, and care for and steward the resources that we all need, which is a beautiful set of principles to live our lives by, I have to say. I want to acknowledge Two-Spirit people who have always known that gender is an expression of spirit, which is like a critical part of how I think about gender now, not just intellectually, but that it is a manifestation of our spirit. We're going to go deeper. I want to acknowledge trans, genderqueer, and gender nonconforming people. And I know it's all language. It's all language. And we'll get into that a little bit, who exist all over the world, despite centuries of criminalization and erasure. And I can say everywhere I've gone, without even seeking trans people, motorcycle in the background, I have found trans people everywhere I've gone, and genderqueer people, and they exist despite some of the harshest living conditions. And as I say, I use the word criminalization very intentionally. That might be through state and law, that might be through policies, that might be through social discrimination, that might be through never being able to get employed or experiencing a lot of violence when you move through the world. Just want to acknowledge those folks. And then I want to acknowledge the challenges and parallel opportunities of gathering in the digital ethers. So I will do my best to kind of create space for folks to dialogue, to give input, to ask questions. I invite you to write things in the chat. I probably won't see it, but Nicole is my left eye and will let me know. Woo! And there will be instances where the floor will be open. We're gonna have some breakout rooms. So different ways for y'all to participate. As ever and always, you can choose to not. You can pass. I also really invite folks to use ASL, American Sign Language. So this is, thank you. I use it abundantly. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It also looks like kisses. It's great. This is applause. Love what you're saying. Yes. Oh, yes. A great way to show affirmation. This is a way of showing that's heartfelt. That's really heartfelt. And this is sorry to hear that. Those are just a couple things. Yes. Oh, yes. Couple things. I invite y'all to explore those, and you can also create your own nonverbal ways of just resonating. Yeah. If you want to, no pressure, no pressure. And as I said, Nicole will try and keep an eye on the chats, and I'll give you prompts along the way. Having said that, I also really want to invite some self-reflection, if it's possible, if you don't just naturally always have drawing and writing materials nearby, if you can collect some drawing and writing materials beside you, yes, that would be wonderful. There will be some mapping that we're going to do, some self-reflection and mapping. It's going to be fun, I promise. I can't promise, but you can also pass on that too, but I would invite you to explore it. So having said that, I'm going to go a little bit deeper. The North Star. One might call these goals. I'm going to say I build all my curriculum always with the North Star, and it definitely comes from doing work like transformative justice, where often you find yourself in the mess of a conflict or a crisis, and you're like, I just don't know what to do. I don't know where I'm going. And sometimes I feel like when I'm describing gender, I feel a little bit like that. And then I'm like, okay, I imagine I'm in the woods and it's dark at night. Where's the North Star? There it is. That's the direction I'm going. Boom. Okay. So a little bit less goals and a little bit more like orienting myself towards something. So this is what I'm aiming to do. One, on a self-reflective note, unpacking how we limit self-expression. We have been socialized to limit self-expression because of assumptions and stereotypes around gender, or limited understanding about gender, or actually existing in places where to cross the lines of gender, very risky, very risky. Woo, we learn so young. So unpacking some of that a little bit, while simultaneously considering how we can welcome gender fabulosity. And I definitely coined that term myself with some young trans folks, gender fabulosity. It's meant to just invite all the possibilities. Am I right? Yes, language. It's mutable. And then the other overarching North Star is building relationships, spaces, cultures, ecosystems that are truly welcoming and where people can be whole, nuanced, and gender fabulous together. Which means you can always say, I chose this expression intentionally, actively, every moment. I wish I could say that that was true for me. I wish I could say that was true for everyone. We'll go deeper, but that is the North Star. That's the North Star. Okay. Y'all with me? Moving forward. Little check-in. I love me a little check-in. So this is just riffing off of actually the question that Nicole asked. If y'all are inclined to put in the chat, I can see your names, your preferred pronouns, and also the territories you live in, or more specifically, the territories you feel connection with. Maybe that's territories that raised you up, territories that have passed on teachings, territories that you've always felt you belonged. And I say that because when I was growing up, I'll parallel this whole session about my own experience. I definitely from very early on understood that my gender expression and my sexuality and my gender identity was not okay, or it wasn't welcome. I always felt I belonged in the natural world, always. And I still lean into that to this very day when I'm like, oh, I'm experiencing some serious gender dysphoria, not because there's something wrong with me, but because how people see and engage with me. Go to the natural world. Always find that belonging. So if you're inclined to put in the chat your name, the pronouns that you rock, and it's, if this is the first time you get asked this, woohoo, awesome, eureka. And if it's not, that's also cool too. If it is the first time, it could be she, her, it could be he, him. Some people use they, them. Myself, I use they, them. I'm finding more and more folks from various different language bases who would say, oh, we have this pronoun that is not gendered. It's just for all human beings. Woo! And other folks who would say, oh, my language base, we don't use pronouns at all. It's super confusing to me. You can just use my name. Oh, and then again, because language is mutable, you might decide tonight I'm creating a new pronoun. That would be very welcome as well. And Nicole, maybe if you're inclined to read a few, just a couple things that get shared in the chat for me, that would be so lovely.
Fantastic. I've got Nicole, she, her, currently in Treaty 7 territory, Métis Region 3, that's me. I'm Aurora, my pronouns are she and her, the Treaty 7 territories. Caitlin, they, them. Michelle, she, her, both on Treaty 7 territory, or colonially known as Banff. Happy to be here as a visitor. Cecilia, she, her, Lapland, Sweden, connection with anywhere forest. Jessica, she, her, Treaty 7 territory. 2, she, her, queer identifying folks at work at Fire and Flower in Banff and Treaty 7 territories. Serena and Shannon. Hi, I currently live in Treaty 7 territory, home of the Stony Blackfoot Confederacy, Tsuut'ina and Métis homeland. I grew up in unceded territory of the Ktunaxa and the shushwap. That's a wonderful new word for me. I hope it came in my mouth in a beautiful way. Catherine, she, her, Treaty 7. Deb, she, her. I live in Eksha and feel such gratitude for growing up in the Treaty 7 territory, deeply connected to the Stony Nakota Nations. Jen, she, her, living in Treaty 7 territory. She, her, L. I use me, she, her. This is a new concept for me, Treaty 7 territory. We both love mountains, more so going down than up. I love how Caitlin beautifully said, everybody. Thank you, everyone. Chimigwich, Ishnish.
Lovely. Thanks, Nicole. Beautiful reading. All right, moving along, friends. Right there, though, some teachings. Woo! An opportunity there, and I'm going to dig deeper into noticing our feelings, because I'm going to say our feelings are a direct connection to our spirits. Direct connection. So when folks are invited to think about their preferred pronoun for the first time, often that does bring up like a, ooh, it may be a little trip up or a feeling like, oh, I've never been asked, or why would I be asked? And that's an opportunity. That's an entryway into what are those feelings about? What does that lead me to understand in terms of, yeah, maybe I haven't questioned this before because I haven't had to. There's an opportunity to do some exploration. Okay. Oh, I went backwards. So sorry. Schloop. And forward again. So, gender. Wow. So before I get into this working definition, I do want to say that for myself, and I, definitely raise your hand or write in the chat if you had a similar experience. But when I was growing up, I definitely understood that gender was male or female, boy or girl, woman or man, pink or blue. I definitely understood that, right? Feel free to show a sign if you're like, I think that's what I understood, that gender was male or female, pink or blue, one of those two assignments. And in fact, that technically the day you're born, the doctor just like, whoop, looks in there. Oh, depending on your bits, just your bits. Pink blanket, blue blanket. Henceforth, you will be raised as if you were perpetually swaddled in a pink or blue blanket. That is how I understood gender until much later in my life. Whew. So the working definition, a social construct informed by socialization, culture, norms, and assumptions. Woo, that's some wordy stuff. Some wordy stuff right there. Hi, little one. So to say it, I'm opening with the most complex line. Gender is something that we construct socially through our understandings of culture and norms. And these have shifted over time. Previously, pink was a male color, apparently, in some places. In other places, pink and blue have nothing to do with gender. Though I would say that has become a predominant association. Yes. Gender is a kaleidoscope of social and cultural markers, like clothing, for sure, like a skirt. A mini skirt is a very loaded gender marker. If you wear a mini skirt and you have a beard, you will experience violence. Those two associations, because they're serious markers. Facial hair, a mini skirt. If it's a pink mini skirt, total confusion. Everything we understand about the world is falling apart. I don't know what to do with myself. That single clothing item, the way we walk, the way we move, the tone of our voice, the pitch of our voice, our body shape, if we have curvature, the things we're interested in, our roles. And of course, anyone who is, had any influence from feminism at any wave, we've heard about gender roles and how in particular women have had specific gender roles imposed on them. Still very true, still very true. And I'll also say uses of power, who is able to access what kinds of power, how we express it in society. All of these things are a myriad, a kaleidoscope of markers that we use to express our gender. Woo! Yes, yes, yes. And some folks are able to, based on their physiological body, their biological body, other aspects of their identity, which we'll get deeper into, have a little bit more freedom to play with those markers, and other folks, I would say, have less freedom to experiment, to explore. Gender is an imposed assumption based on biological sex or physiology. So it is at once, when I put things on my body to articulate out to people, this is my gender, it is also what other people interpret of my body, how I move through the world. And more often than not, there are assumptions that are imposed there, depending on if I'm wearing that hot pink miniskirt, for example, woo, or how I'm walking, or if I have a beard but I giggle in a high-pitched voice, as an example. So gender is also an assumption that's imposed on bodies. And then these two, the last two, are my favorite aspects of this definition, and all of these are true: an expression of spirit, and that spirit which comes through us from the day we're born until the day we die, absolutely. And it's a performance. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's unconscious. Woo! And by performance, I mean there's a script, perhaps. There's an embodiment, absolutely. There's costume that we embody, 100%. Characters even that we embody, 100%. And none of that is to say that we aren't consciously choosing this. We can, absolutely, but it is a performance. And by that I mean any one of us could choose tomorrow, I'm going to switch this up. I'm going to change the way I walk. I'm going to change what I wear. And if I really, really invest myself in that performance, perhaps I might start to slowly nudge into presenting a different way. I'm going to shave my hair. I'm going to grow my hair long. ... There's all kinds of ways that we can play with. And I think of high femme as an example of, like, tonight I'm getting dressed up real nice. And I employ that myself. I think of myself as kind of a dapper dandy. And when I'm getting, when I'm really getting dressed up, oh yeah, I put eyeliner on, I wear a nice hat, vest, really polish my nail polish, woo, and I perform it up. My gender fabulosity. So I think gender is all of these things. If you have anything else you want to add to this working definition, please feel free to type it in the chat. And I also invite you with your writing materials, if any of these definitions are like, it's getting stuck for me here, I'm not sure about that, to just take note, to write it down and to take note. Because again, anywhere that shows up, I'm not sure about that, is an opportunity to dig deeper. Yeah. Cool. Moving right along. Gender. A short embodied practice. I want to propose we do a little embodied practice, because I keep saying I think that gender is very much connected to spirit. I want to shout out Alicia Brown in this beautiful piece, which is very much about embodied practice. It was actually connected to an article that was all about embodiments to connect to our lineages. Things that are around us that we might not necessarily realize are resources. Ooh, okay. So if you're inclined, this can be very quick. It'll be very quick. If you're inclined to, it's a self-reflexive exercise. So you could shut your camera off if you want. You don't need to be tuned into the rest of the group per se. I'll give you a second to organize yourselves and make sure that you're sitting in a comfortable way. A comfortable way. Yep. And then I would say from there, you can close your eyes, or you can have them just kind of gazing in front of you gently, whatever feels good for you. And again, I invite you to just notice where feelings show up as we go through this exercise. And I'm calling this embodied social justice, actually, connecting to spirit. So your eyes are closed, or perhaps they're open gently. And I would invite you to just notice your breath, which is always with you. And sometimes I notice where my breath touches my nose, like in my nostrils, or where it passes through my nasal cavity, through my throat, as it fills my lungs. Just noticing your breath, one of those elemental gifts, absolute sign we're connected to this world. Not forcing it, just feeling that breath. feeling it expand your rib cage, feeling it expand your belly. Maybe for a second, noticing the space inside your body, the spaciousness inside your body. And maybe even inviting it to be as spacious and big as possible. Ooh, belly, chest, shoulders out. The inside of your body being as open and spacious and big and voluptuous as possible. And still gently breathing, noticing your breath moving through your body. I like to think that the more space I give inside my body, the more the room there is for intuition, for courage, dignity, love, the more space I give inside myself. I invite you to feel that for a second. And then I invite you, if you can, to feel wherever your body makes contact with your chair or the ground, just noticing that point of contact, feeling it, perhaps taking note that that is the place where the Earth's gravity draws you in, where that holding is always present. What a beautiful gift, the gravity that our planet offers to hold us in place ever so gently. I try to notice it and imagine, oh yeah, I'm a human and I'm the earth in human form. My bones are made of the minerals of the earth. Oh yes. How beautiful is that? So your feet are held by the gravity of the earth. Your belly, your body is open and expansive. And as you draw your attention upward, perhaps sensing like a thread of spider web connected to the top of your head that lifts you up ever so gently, that actually extends into the sky, into the atmosphere, into the cosmos, a gentle drawing up while the earth gently holds you in place. So the most gentlest of expansion vertically, while also you feel this beautiful expansion horizontally in your belly. Perhaps feeling a deeper or deepened sense of dignity in this big, beautiful space that your body can take up. Mhm. I'd invite you for a second to imagine the space behind you, all of that space behind you, full of your ancestors, the ones you know, the ones you don't know, the ones who have passed on dreams and teachings and wishes and challenges and responsibilities. That's an energy behind you, like a momentum, like a wind behind you. And that your mentors and your teachers and those kinfolk who have been invested in you, that they're behind you. That energy is there behind you. A gentle momentum forward. Earth holding you in a beautiful gravitational draw. The cosmos lifting you up. And lastly, before you, I invite you to sense your path and your purpose. Your magic, the medicine that you bring to the world. Your unique gifts. And in that, your spirit that from your earliest age of consciousness invited you with curiosity to explore things, to try things out, to pursue particular studies, to pursue particular people. That spirit, which will till the day you die inform your purpose, your magic, your medicine, your gifts. See if you can sense that drawing you forward all of those resources and energies always with you, always with you. Just feeling all of that, if you can, for a moment. And when you feel ready, I welcome you to notice the sounds in the room around you, only when you feel ready. Perhaps fluttering your eyes open, welcoming light back in. And when you're ready, show me a sign that you're back in the digital ethers with me. Woo-wee. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, yes, yes. I will say that was my, the quick version is very open source. And the intention is absolutely to tune into the feeling of spirit, as well as all of those resources around us. It's something that I have been leaning into a lot. I've been bringing to my work with queer and trans youth a lot, because we often find ourselves in situations where we're like, I don't have a support network. I don't have a job. I don't have a house. I don't feel resourced in any way. What can I lean on? These are some things that are always there with us. I share that. Okay. Moving right along. I do want to say, though, that's a North Star too. Whenever you're like, I'm not sure where I'm going. I'm not sure where's my authentic self. That's a North Star. Whatever you can do to tune into your spirit. Okay. I'm probably preaching to the converted, but I have to just have to say these things. I do. Okay, here we go. Some deeper work, my friends. So hopefully you've got your writing materials in front of you. Here on this map, at the center is actually a beautiful illustration of Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, who actually coined the term intersectionality, which in a whole other way was a thread of connection with Nicole many years ago. I won't go too deep into that, but just want to acknowledge, and I'll come back to the term intersectionality. So this web, this map, if you will, of human identifiers, I'd love for you to create this. So create first in the middle of your page something that represents self or a squiggle or anything just in the middle there that represents you, and then to map some, or if you're feeling really ambitious, all of these categories, the inner categories. So, and I'll read them off, and I'll give some clarifying information just to make sure we're all on the same page. So race being a political category, white, Black, Latinx, Filipino, and ethnicity being something much more nuanced that actually is about culture and genetics and physiology and place. So race, again, is a political denomination, not to be confused with ethnicity, which is biological and cultural. So like French, like Anishinaabe, like Hungarian versus white European, or versus First Nation more broadly. Or yeah, go for it, Nicole. You got a question.
I do. Am I right that we're doing this for ourselves, and that we need not necessarily show it in any way to anyone else? Later on, we'll have some discussion. You might choose to share something. It's entirely up to you. Really, it's your own space. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that, double check. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So it's absolutely a map for yourself. We are going to go into breakout rooms. You don't have to share any of this, and rather insights that come from it. And I'll come back to sex and gender and all that good stuff. Language, pretty self-explanatory. And that could be verbal or nonverbal. Beliefs, that could be religious, that could be philosophical, political, ... But those things can show up for sure. They can be absolute identifiers of people. Education, employment, subcultures. So I think of things like, I'm a gamer, really into foosball. I don't think that's a subculture, but maybe ping pong. Ping pong is definitely a subculture. Legal status. I feel like, especially, I don't know, in Toronto, that is a really big part of human identity, in particular, whether you have Canadian citizenship absolutely criminal status. And I'm thinking, especially with young people that I work with, how that impacts how they move through the world, how they're seen, their ability to access jobs. And these can become identifiers for people. I'm a criminalized person, or I have been to jail, ... Just like I'm married can become an identifier for people. Legal status. Nationality. If you hold many passports, perhaps you have multiple nationalities. So with each of these, any of these that speak to you that you're like, oh yeah, I can answer that pretty quickly, you'd write it and then add another line. My language, I speak English and French and a little bit of Serbian. Woo! My beliefs, just a couple words to describe, just a couple words. And then we get into the juicy stuff like class. Oh, good old class. You might have a note that's like, this is where I started, this is where I have gone. And by class, of course, we mean low income, working class, middle class, upper middle class, upwardly mobile, ... And I do want to say that I've been intentional in naming human identifiers that are visible. Every one of these things has the potential to be visible, even performed. Woo. Land. Land is an interesting one. I don't think that you can exist in the world without a relationship to land, even if you're unconsciously just a landowner, or you've never owned land in your life, you've always been a renter, etc. That these things show up. And again, because I work in low-income communities where folks are like, no one in my family has ever owned land or anything. And it's ascribed on our bodies. It's ascribed on our bodies. In the same way I think of when I move through the Muskokas in cottage country in Canada, that there's an aesthetic to that relationship to land ownership. Age, self-explanatory. Size is about, the height of your body or the width of your body, how much space your body takes up. Oh yeah, good stuff, good stuff. Abilities, these are, I hope it's self-explanatory, but I do separate it in terms of physical, mental, and emotional abilities, because I think often we think just about mental abilities, or we just think about physical abilities. We rarely think about emotional abilities. And I actually think that is directly connected to sexism, but that's a larger conversation. Because I think that women have been socialized because of our assumed gender to be more emotionally attuned, and that men have been socialized because of their gender roles to be less attuned to their emotions. They might be attuned to their emotions if they've been lucky enough to not be penalized for attuning into their emotions. Women are not necessarily penalized, or we might be told you're hysterical, or oh, you're too sensitive, but we can still do that. Whereas men who are gendered as male or masculine are definitely penalized for showing emotions, definitely. And of course, we get into intersectionality. So, okay, wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Actually, no, I'm going there. Okay. So intersectionality, okay? So I think of all these lines connected to all these different identifiers, that they intersect in the middle of every human being. That every single one of us, when we move through the world, we have these things. If only we could see all of them together, radiating around us as a part of who we are. So as an example, I was giving emotions and the ability to express emotions and to do that safely. So that to me, emotional ability intersects with sex, biological sex, with gender, and it also absolutely intersects with class, race, ethnicity. And by that I mean a young white man who is middle class might be able to access emotion and express emotion more than if he were low income and street involved. And I could say directly that is because the stakes are higher to show any weakness. And that is a disadvantage by and large. That doesn't mean it is always true, because every human being can make choices. Every human being can make choices. It might be harder to make choices for some people depending on how they look. So too, if you're a racialized young man in the streets, what you have to work with is very different from a young white man in the streets. That is very true. Your ability to show your emotions, the expectation to show your physical power or strength, all of these things, which invariably connect to gender. Woo-wee. Okay. So hopefully you've gotten a little bit of time to map this out, to take some time writing how you would describe all of these pieces. Okay, so, and then I left out the top right corner, sex, gender, and sexuality, because we're going to spend a bit more time there. But I do invite you to think through. So sex is about biological sex. That is your bits. It's also chromosomes and hormones. That is for sure not to be confused with gender, which of course is an identity or an awareness, how you understand yourself, as well as an expression. And the reason those are separated, I give myself as an example. When I was young, growing up in a rural context where I understood gender roles were very particular, I understood that I was gender fabulous. I really did, but I did not express it. I understood that I had a sexuality that was outside of the norm, but I did not express it. I did not express it until I was in a safe environment where I could express it outwardly, where I could experiment a little bit. And that's all I did. Every year of my life, I experiment a little bit more, so long as I'm in a safe and welcoming environment. And that fabulosity, it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows. And so one might say, I live in a bubble. And I would say, I live in a growing bubble that allows me to truly be myself. So gender, and then of course sexuality. And I would also separate sexuality, and we'll go deeper into this too, that sexuality could be about desire, like who you see walking down the street and you're like, or who repulses you, or who, also that you may not have any desire whatsoever. Asexuality, okay, desire versus who you have romantic relationships with, which might be very different. Actually, a lot of people are attracted to a very broad gamut of people, or a very narrow gamut of people, and only have romantic partnerships with a very particular set of people. And that might be because that's what's okay. It might be because that's just what happened. It might be because it aligns with your goals and values, ... You just haven't met the right person. There's so many reasons. Or it's just what is socially acceptable, or even socially rewarded. Whoa. I'll throw in, there's a whole other piece, which is, I like this nuance, that you may also only have relationships with people, romantic relationships with people that you have like known for a good long time and they have deep trust with. And maybe that never happens. So in fact, you haven't had really deep romantic relationships. This is a whole other thing. I'll go deeper into that, but just wanted to offer that out. So, okay. I digress. I'm all about the stories. Here we go. So hopefully you've done some writing. I wanted to invite you to just think about these questions and to make some notes on your map, okay? Are any of these identifiers that you've written about visible, overtly visible, without making any effort? Like I would say that race is a very, very visible thing that for the most part is very difficult to change. I think depending on your body, there are other things like perhaps physical ability, perhaps language, that are super visible, that are hard to change. So making some little notes, or maybe even putting a little star. Yeah, that one's super visible. This one's really important to me, but it's not very visible unless I do something very intentional to show it. Which ones are mutable, which is to say you can change it. I think class is something like that, you may be very poor, but you can go to Value Village and get, a nice suit, and then you perform a certain way to look like you're from a different class, maybe for that interview. It's hard to sustain, but you can do it for a moment. So too passing. Passable is very much a term that comes out of queer community and is specifically connected to gender. And I share this because often gender non-conforming folks or transgendered folks or genderqueer folks have to try and pass in order to have safety. And that might shift in like a 1 hour period. So I give this example, and actually, Nicole, I think you probably remember doing this exercise that came through working with a crew of racialized queer and trans youth. And we were talking about being downtown and having a bubble of safety, relative safety, and then traveling back out to wherever we live, which is not to say that the places where people live are homophobic, but even just traveling, even just traveling. So people we would perform as we want to be when we're downtown together. We'd be playing, goofing around. And then we would start to travel outward as if we were going north. We would say north of Bloor. And then we would shift. We would show each other, this is how I shift. This is how I perform. This is the hoodie I put on. This is the like how I sit on the TTC. This is how I never smile. This is what I do to pass in the gender that people expect me to be in. It's a conscious trickster move, if you will, a conscious performance in order to have safety. So then I offer, what are aspects of your identity that pass, that you can, if I bring this thing in, I can pass for that. If I wear this thing, I can pass for that. Those are always important things for us to think about as we move through the world. Woo-wee! So you can make little notes on your map, and anywhere you're like, I've never thought of it. That's awesome. That's an opportunity to dig deeper. Yes. Another critical piece of this, and all of this to me informs our understandings of gender. All of these identifiers, every single one of those categories, it has a normal or ideal expression in our society. And by that, I mean, I'm going to say Canada more broadly. Every single one of those categories has what is viewed as a norm and an ideal in our society. Every single one of them. And in order to have ideals, of course, you have to have a hierarchy, unfortunately, which is to say that other aspects, other expressions are less ideal, or even disadvantageous, and in some cases are in fact criminalized. And that isn't necessarily always about law, and very much about how our society relates to things that we identify as abnormal. As a trans person, I have definitely experienced the association of craziness, of dangerousness with transness, gender nonconformity. Only crazy trans people, often associated with drug users and sex workers. That has to be unpacked so deeply. That has to be unpacked so deeply. When I was moving to Toronto, so many of my family members said, you better watch out for those trannies, those sex workers, and those drug users. And now I'm like, that's my community, actually. I intentionally and actively choose people who might otherwise be viewed as criminal, not because they're criminal, because they also have immense gifts. They have immense gifts. Just saying. So it's important for us to, of course, identify which aspects of our identity have been viewed as normal or ideal, because we often, especially when we're young, because we learn all of this so young, if it is mutable, where have we leaned away from something that wasn't viewed as ideal? Gender is often one of those places. If it's visible and it's rewarded, we lean towards that often, unless we can't do anything about it. Gender is one of those areas, for sure. If we lean into something that we know we run the risk of experiencing, being thrown out of our families, not being employed, being viewed as dangerous, experiencing violence when we travel on the subway, on an airplane, on the street, at night, we might lean away from it. It takes immense courage and a leaning into our spirit, trusting our spirit to experience, to just trust, this is who I am. Woo-wee. But in that gray zone, gender dysphoria, which is to say, I'm not sure what my gender is. My body doesn't fit with how I see myself. Or is it that society and society's views of my body doesn't fit with how my body moves through the world? Woo-wee. Okay, sorry, I digress once again. The last question here, how do your identifiers intersect? We touched on this a little bit, but just thinking about, so how does my race, how has my culture, how has my beliefs influenced the manifestation of my gender? How has it influenced the languages that I use? How has it influenced my relationship to land? All of these things intersect in ways that do influence each other. Woo, it's a beautiful matrix to explore. And in particular, how has it influenced the wonderful manifestation of your gender? And I do want to make sure I pause right here to say, in any of my questions, any of the things that I'm inviting people to think about, I definitely want to say now and over and over and over again, wherever you are with your gender is awesome. Every question here, if you're like, I never thought about that before, it's not a bad thing. It's okay. That's where you are. That's the point. It's great wherever you are. And any new opportunity to explore a new question, a new expression, that's awesome if that feels good for you. And if it doesn't, exploring why it doesn't. So I just really want to say that over and over again, if I can. Wherever you are is wonderful. There's no right or wrong expression, really, unless it's an expression that prevents others from expressing themselves. And I really deeply believe that. How's everybody doing? Moving right along. Okie dokie. So we dug into this a little bit. We already dug into this a little bit, but I want to go a little bit deeper and just invite you to just spend a little bit of time thinking about the gender gingerbread. Okay. So as I described, often people assume biological sex means gender, to say that in fact, there are at least 3 sexes. Yes, there's a male sex. Yes, there's a female sex. There's also an intersex. An intersex actually has multiple categories. So because biological sex is connected to chromosomes, hormones, and how that manifests in your body. So that could be the bits that you have. Intersex people, I identify and I am an intersex person, are somewhere in between, strictly classified male or female in terms of their biology. So there's actually 6 different categories, and some would say more chromosome categories than just XY, XXY, etc. And in terms of hormones, as we know, estrogen and testosterone do shape the body. There are many, many children. In Canada, it's estimated at 1 in 800. Some people will say 1 in 1,000, but that's still that's a lot, friends. There's in Toronto alone, several million people. 1 in 600 babies born intersex, which is to say not so cleanly male or female, biologically speaking. In many cases, actually, what happens is actually someone who has a uterus and also a penis, which is kind of amazing. I think that's totally amazing. Unfortunately, really until very recently, that was seen as a monstrosity. If you had anything feminine going on in your body and also a penis, but it was small, it would get cut off. If there was any question that you couldn't be raised and socialized as a man, you would be resexed as a woman. I immediately think that also is sexism. That also is sexism. If you don't have an appropriately sized penis, you could never succeed in the world. Chop that off, raise you as a girl. I also want to say there have been, until really the last decade, extremely high rates of suicide in intersex people. Because more often than not, a doctor and their parents made that decision for them, raised them based on the sex that they assigned to them. And later in their life, they're like, I don't know, I'm always feeling so confused about my identity. It's not just about my sexuality. It's not just about my gender. Something is off here. They weren't able to make that decision for themselves. Wait a minute. Inherent in there is a question. Could we not let children decide for themselves? Could we not? Woo! ... I leave that hanging. Could we not let children decide for themselves? Okay, so that's intersexed. Lots of opportunities there. Absolutely. If you have a lot of hormones that are estrogen specifically, a lot of estrogen moving through your body, you will have a curvaceous body. More than likely, you will have a curvaceous body. If you have a curvaceous body, you will be sexed, you will be gendered feminine. Absolutely. Or feminized. So men that have curvaceous bodies are feminized. They're emasculated. They're seen as weak, as less than. Absolutely. That's also fat phobia, and it's totally sexism also. Just saying, sexism shows up a lot. It shows up a lot. And if you are a genderqueer person that has curves and you're trying to not identify as feminine, that will be difficult too. This is why often folks who have a lot of estrogen in the body might bind, wear a binder, or might get top surgery. Because still to this day, If you have breasts and you walk out in the street, people will automatically read your body in a particular way. Earlier today was just watching a man walking down the street topless, and I was just thinking, wow, how wonderful that must be to not even think about it. Just, and he actually, I would say, had bigger breasts than I do. No shame, that's great. And that he felt no shame to go topless, and from such an early age. And I just think about this separation. Such an early age, I'm gonna say 5 years old. Young boys understand they don't have to feel any shame. They can be topless and feel the sun on their body. And young girls understand that is not for me. I'm not allowed to do that. Actually, I will feel shame about my body. I understand that I will be objectified, I will be sexualized, I will be demonized. Sexism again. I love feeling the sun on my back. I often feel like the only way I could do that is to get top surgery. That is a place where I experience it all the time, because I just want to feel the sun on my back. I grew up agrarian, like I said, working out in the fields until about 12, topless. It was hot. Until an aunt was visiting, and she was like, "What are you doing? You're a girl, you can't be topless. You're gonna go to jail. This is illegal." Immediately I felt total shame, and I still feel that shame until this day. And that's not to ascribe on anyone that you should or shouldn't want to go topless, just to say that's a reality. That's the reality. Okay. Gender awareness, we touched on that. That's how you understand your gender, which I'm going to say is very hard to parse from expression. But that gender awareness can actually be so expansive when you let yourself. It can be so expansive. Woo! The things that you imagine that you might do and wear and walk, and how you might sing. Often the expression is much more limited. I'll give the example of when I first came to Toronto. So I was saying I tamped everything down. I knew that I was queer. I understood that I was trans. Tamped everything down. When I got to Toronto, connected to the queer community, and I immediately people were like, "Oh, you're a butch. You're a baby butch. You're a butch." I had no idea what that meant, but okay, sounds good. If I'm welcome, okay, wonderful. And I definitely did connect that to my attraction. So I would say I was attracted to more feminine people. So I assumed, okay, I should perform masculinity in a certain way because that seems to be what attracts people who I'm attracted to. I'm going to dress up like a dandy. I'm going to express myself in these ways. But I also understood I shouldn't giggle too much and I shouldn't smile too much because that's too feminine. And only recently did I realize that I had totally policed my giggle. What's more like an expression of your spirit than your giggle? Am I right? So now I'd really try to consciously let the giggle shine, let it shine. So I'm just showing the tangles, if you will, of expression, of attraction, of awareness and sex. And of course, none of these things are linear, none of them at all. So even this map here, it offers a linear scale for understanding gender identity, womanness, manness, gender expression, and all of these things, they suggest a linear scale, but really, in fact, they're a galaxy. But really, in fact, they're a galaxy.